Hi there, my name is Tim and welcome back to my channel. I recently went to a pre-retirement seminar of public services employees that included the likes of the police, the fire service and the NHS. Public service employees often get what are known as defined benefit pensions, where the pension you get is based on your years of service, your seniority within an organisation and your age. This then defines what you'll get for the rest of your life and at what age you can get it. With defined benefits pensions, you also have the option to commute some of that pension as a lump sum, and this commutation can sometimes be quite healthy. During that seminar, that lump sum and what you can consider doing with it was discussed, and I suddenly realised two things. One, there were a lot of experienced people in the rooms who had very little experience when it came to finances. And two, many of these retirees, who had often been exposed to more risk than the average person, were completely risk averse when it came to their finances. One person I spoke to had decided to max out the amount of premium bonds he could buy, citing tax mitigation as a reason. Another person said they would never go anywhere near investing in stocks and shares because of what their father had done in the past in investing in a company that had collapsed and where he'd lost all his money. I'm not saying that any of the reasons here cited are wrong, but that maybe financial education is required to help individuals get a more rounded viewpoint on finances. I wanted to make this video just to briefly discuss some of the options that you might want to consider if holding a lump sum, not just as a public service employee, but as anyone, whether you're near to retirement or not, who might have this nice financial dilemma. This really is an at-a-glance look at the options we're going to list, and we're just throwing some pros and cons of each. I'm not seeking to change your minds here if your mind's already made up, but what I am trying to do is open them. Remember, this is a financial education video and should not be construed as financial advice. Your decisions should always be made in relation to your personal circumstances and not because of what I or anyone else tells you on YouTube. Please do your research and consider your options properly. Okay, so let's begin with the first option, which is what I've mentioned already, premium bonds. Firstly, don't confuse premium bonds with those fixed rate bonds you can get from banks or the bonds that you can purchase from government or big corporations. We'll talk about those later on. So a premium bond is a bond that you can buy from the NS&I government website, and it's like a lottery. This is your chance to win big, and you can win prizes from buying bonds from anything between £25 and up to £1 million. By purchasing these bonds, you get entered into a monthly draw with a range of prizes available. Other than winning prizes, there's no other return that you get on these bonds. At the time of filming this video, the average return is 4.4%. Any winnings that you get from bonds are tax-free, and your bonds are guaranteed 100% by the government. So moving on to the cons, there's no guarantee that you're going to win anything at all, therefore there's no guarantee of any return whatsoever. I talked about the average interest rate you might receive as a holder just now. However, this is just an average. You may not get anything back, and it all depends on your luck within the draw. Also, the average interest rate that is advertised, 4.4%, is significantly lower than what you might get back from just a basic easy access interest account. There is a maximum of £50,000 per person that you can put into premium bonds. On depositing money and purchasing bonds, you have to wait a full month before you get entered into the next prize draw, so there will be a delay between purchase and entry. If you do not win or do not win big, your bonds will actually lose value in real terms, as they will not keep pace with inflation, therefore losing their purchasing power. Yes, you can look at them as being safe in relation to being 100% backed by the government and being tax-free. However, it is very likely that bonds will lose value over time in relation to purchasing power, with inflation rising and bonds not growing in any nominal value unless you're lucky enough to win and win big. Are premium bonds therefore as low risk as you think? So moving very quickly on to the next option, which is easy access savings accounts. And some of the pros of these types of accounts. At present, they're paying around 5% in interest, which ain't bad. Your provider of choice should be backed by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, meaning that in the event of provider failure, you'll get back £85,000 of any money that you hold. Easy access savings accounts give you instant access to your cash, meaning that you can use these for emergency funds. And they are generally low risk, as you can see what you're going to get back from the interest rates that are advertised. Moving on to some of the cons. Interest rates could reduce over time, meaning that you'll get less back in interest than you planned for, making it harder for you to plan for financial events in the future. In relation to large lump sums, you'd have to use an ISA version of this type of account to protect your money from tax, but you only have a £20,000 allowance each year to put into an ISA. This might not be enough if you're trying to deposit a large lump sum, and the tax that you can pay on interest savings can be significant. You only have relatively small personal savings allowance, which could mean that you pay significant tax on larger lump sums. As with premium bonds, cash savings do not generally compete with inflation in the longer term. So even if you see the nominal value of your money staying the same, plus a bit of interest being paid on top, in real terms, this might be losing purchasing power over time. Okay, so moving swiftly on to the next option, which would be fixed rate savings, also known as bonds, but not to be confused with premium bonds or the bonds that are issued by government or larger corporations. These are those fixed rate bonds over 1, 3 and 5 year periods that you see banks advertising. So let's look at the pros firstly. And these are good if you want to put your savings away for a set period of time where they're locked away and you know what interest you'll get and you know exactly what you get back at the maturity date in maybe 1, 3 or 5 years time, whatever it might be. This makes them a potentially good vehicle for planning for future financial events. It's generally the case, but maybe not at the moment in 2024, where if you fixed your savings in for longer periods, you get higher rates of interest to compensate for that. So I'll still list as a pro the fact that if you lock your savings away for longer periods of time, in normal circumstances, generally you will get higher rate of interest. Again, if you choose a provider which is backed by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, then you get up to £85,000 protected. And moving on to the cons. Once you lock your money away into one of these fixed interest accounts, it is locked away and you may not have access to it, or if you do want access to it early, you may have to pay a penalty. Interest rates could rise during the period that your money is locked away, and there's more chance of this the longer it's locked away for, meaning that there might have been better rates that you could have chased to put your money into to get better returns had your money been available to you. If you're saving outside of an ISA, just like we mentioned with easy access, then you will be liable to tax once you go over your personal savings threshold. And your personal savings allowance doesn't get carried over into each new tax year if you don't use it. If you don't use it, you lose it, meaning that with a fixed rate account and all that interest that gets paid after year 3 or year 5, your personal savings allowance can only be used for that final year, meaning that you might pay a lot more tax. As with premium bonds and as with easy access accounts, you have that same risk that I mentioned with regards to losing your purchasing power and the real value of your savings, where cash doesn't generally compete with inflation over the long term and the cost of living. The next option is bonds. And just to clarify, I'm talking about bonds that are issued by governments and by larger corporations. And they issue these as a means of borrowing. So let's firstly look at the pros. Investing in government bonds is secure, as governments do tend to pay their bills, and if they haven't got enough money to pay their bills, they'll print more money. Also, the chances of a bond issued by a larger corporation or strong company being defaulted on is low. You know exactly what you get with a bond, you pay for one, and you get that fixed rate of interest for its full term. At its maturity date, you get all your money back that you paid for the bond. Bonds come in all different sizes, such as length of maturities and different types of interest rates. This makes these very useful for you when you're planning future financial events. Whatever happens with market conditions makes no difference to you if you just intend to hold that bond until it matures and then get your money back. There are tax benefits too. If you purchase a bond which is issued by the UK government, these bonds are known as gilts, then any capital gains that you make on the bond from maybe selling it early will be yours tax-free, although the interest payments will still be taxable. So let's take a look at the cons. Single bonds are more difficult to purchase, as there is more choice of different types of bonds, such as ones with different duration and others with different interest rates, and financial terminology, which makes things even more confusing. You can only purchase these bonds generally through brokers. I've done previous videos on online investment brokers, and there are only few that actually sell individual bonds. Should you for any reason wish to sell your bond prior to its maturity, then you will get the market rate for that bond. And that market rate, although possibly higher, could also be lower too. The market rate of a bond at the time you sell it is influenced by the interest rate at the time, but also inflation. So the longer the bond duration you've locked in, the higher your exposure is to duration risk, but only if you wish to sell the bond before maturity. Although not risk-free, bonds should give you a better return than cash. And there is a chance that bonds will beat inflation, giving you the chance of real returns for a little lower risk than maybe stocks and shares. And stocks and shares is what we're going to move on to next. So let's look at the pros of stocks and shares. The first one is that you could get lucky. You could buy into a company just before it hits a real period of growth, and you could make a large killing. With stocks and shares, also known as equities, you can buy equity funds rather than buying individual shares in companies. For instance, you could buy a global fund, which would enable you to purchase a share in all of the companies in the developed world in all different sectors. And you can do this cheaply, and definitely cheaper than buying individual stocks and shares. Purchasing funds rather than individual stocks and shares is a less risky and lower cost way of investing in equities. Equity funds are great for diversification, as you're not putting all your eggs in one basket and gambling on the fortunes of one company. Stocks and shares have historically provided much better real returns than either cash or bonds. Equity funds are very easy to purchase on investment platforms, and you can do this yourself with a little research and confidence. There are ways of mixing equities with bond funds, those bonds that you get from governments and corporations clubbed together into a fund. And by mixing an equity fund and a bond fund together, you can manage your risk further while still receiving reasonable returns. And then some of the cons, as mentioned earlier, if you invest in the individual shares of a company, then you're reliant on that company's performance, and you will be putting all your eggs in one basket. This increases the risk to your money. And on that story of finding that company just as it hits that period of growth and you make a killing, even the most professional investors struggle to do this. The stock market rises and falls. Therefore, in the shorter term especially, you could end up getting less back than you invested. Your capital is at risk. You need to have a reasonable investment timeline, so your objectives need to be at least 3 to 5 years down the line for it to be worth your while to invest in stocks and shares. And finally, stock prices are volatile. If you have little tolerance for risk, then maybe investing in stocks and shares on their own might not be the right choice for you. Well, there were a few options for you for where you might want to deposit your money. There are other options too, but too many to list in this video as I just wanted to keep this basic. If you would like any further information on any of the options that I've listed, then please comment below and I'll look at doing another video on that subject. Whatever you decide to do, your capacity for risk and your tolerance for risk should be two things to really consider. One way forward would be to consider a mix of all the options that we mentioned in this video. One thing that I would personally stay away from would be, in my opinion, investing in individual stocks and shares of companies. For a quieter life, I personally might look to put a small amount in premium bonds to chance my arm at winning that big prize, keep a proportion of my funds in an easy access account, chasing the highest interest rates that I can, as a means of keeping the money available for emergencies. Putting some of my money into one of those 1, 3 or 5 year fixed rate bonds issued by banks so that I can make some financial planning knowing that I'll get a fixed rate paid to me on a predetermined date. Purchasing those single government bonds where I know I'll get fixed interest payments on a regular basis and I'll get everything back at maturity date. And purchasing one with a duration that suits my personal circumstances. Purchasing a global passive index fund across all countries and all companies and all sectors. Thus diversifying and managing my risk by not putting all my eggs in one basket. This part of the portfolio, although riskier than cash, can be that part of the portfolio that fuels growth. Use a bond fund to dampen the risk of equities. Equity funds and bond funds have negative correlation generally. If I mix a bond fund with an equity fund, then the volatility of that fund in total should lessen. Make sure in all this that you max out your ISA allocation for the year. Whether it's with cash savings or through investing, you have a £20,000 allowance each year, use it up. You can't carry it over, you will lose it. And any value gained in ISAs is yours tax-free, whether it be from capital gains, interest or dividend payments. The most important thing though is, after you've made your decision, is that you have a peaceful night's sleep. Well, I do hope that you're still with me. Please consider hitting the like button if you enjoyed the content of this video, and to subscribing and turning on your notifications so that you know when I've posted new content. Once again, thanks for watching.